Welcome to the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Together we explore the vast landscapes of life, delving into the rich soil of experiences, sowing the seeds of curiosity, and harvesting the profound wisdom that each episode unfolds. Hello again, and welcome to Harvesting Wisdom podcast. I'm your host, Mike McMahon. Today I have with me Taylor Perkins and Joe Rizal. Worried I wasn't going to remember your name. Both have been on our earlier podcast, so this is kind of an updated one. Taylor, of course, you're a client relationship manager with Chasse Building Team. You're a team impact player. You're leadership development focused. And you're working in a collaborative learning environment, and you're a big advocate for that. And that's kind of what you do with your job. So that's Joe, of course, is with UFEs. He kind of operates and runs UFE, part of pretty much everything. So lately, you guys have been working together on couple schools. I think you had one that was fairly big. What was that all about?
Yeah, the great thing about urban farming education is we have the opportunity to partner with businesses in the community, but it's also in doing this, it hasn't been just write a check or show up to an event. We get to leverage the expertise of our partners as well. So we're currently working at Valencia Newcomer School. And one of the great things I learned about Taylor is that she's a master gardener. And she has a passion for gardens in the community. So having that opportunity to actually go in and work with your partner and learn as you go is very exciting. So what are some of the things that we worked on at the last garden?
So this last Saturday, we had chalk paint. So it got a little messy, but we were painting some of the transformers on site where their garden is, just to kind of beautify them up. And then so the kids can kind of have their lessons on that chalkboard paint. They can draw pictures. Like, I think there was a few messages on there when we left. So just something to pizzazz the garden up. And then
we push this concept of STEM. We really should be talking STEAM.
Yes.
Because I'm like a big art fan myself. Yes. And I think one of the reasons you build a garden is the aesthetics anyway, right? And all along when we first started, I talked about taking a school from an institutional setting to a garden-like setting or to a park-like setting. And so that's cool that you do that. Yeah. It's a little extra effort, but it's probably the more fun for a lot of the kids too,
Oh, absolutely. And it's another thing to engage them with. I mean,
right.
And something so simple. I mean,
so you started with that, and then how far along have you gotten on the gardens?
Well, we're gonna take 3 days to do the work. So the first day we rehabbed a lot of the beds, and that's one of the things that when urban farming goes in and works with the school, we talk to the schools about purpose, and you alluded to one of the purposes. We advocate for STEM education, so. Talking to the schools. STEAM. Oh, I'm sorry. I already forgot. Yeah. That was like 30 seconds. That was horrible. But we really want to advocate for using the garden in an instructional way. So going back to your point, that's why we painted the electrical boxes. So we go in, and one of the questions we asked was, how can we turn this into an instructional area? How can we have an outdoor classroom? And you don't always need to put in benches, or you don't always need to put in tables. We use the existing area, and you might think to yourself, well, when you look at some of these areas, like an electric box, it could be an eyesore, or you can use it as an asset. Right. So, but you can't do that unless you think of a purpose. So, what another thing that we wanted to do in the garden was we wanted to get them to experience other aspects of gardening. So, a lot of the gardens we work with now, and we're so happy to partner with you as a master gardener, but we're starting to do vermicomposting and composting. We're telling our schools that we want them to think about the sustainability of all aspects, and that means they have to produce their own soil. Another exciting thing that we're doing, we're thankful for the Chase building team, is we put in an orchard. A lot of times when you go to a school, you see lemon trees, you see orange trees, and that's it. So we put in pomegranates, we put in figs, and this is cool because a lot of the trees that we put in are from cultures from around the world. So it really enables the students that are at this campus, because this is where all the refugees from the entire district go. It enables them to kind of see some familiarity or some food from their home country. In addition to that, we're looking at putting in a monarch way station. We're looking at other habitats, a Serenity Garden. And the great thing about the Serenity Garden, we were actually able to leverage our other partnership with Francis Roses. So a lot of the donated roses that they brought to us, we were able to put into the garden. And so now not only is it educational, it's an area where students can go and feel familiar or connection with culture, but they can go there to relax or de-escalate if they get stressed out.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And the concept that you're coming up with really goes back to conservation, right? So you're going into a lot of these areas, a lot of these settings, and we're not saying let's tear everything down. Let's work with what's there, and that's kind of a tenet in what we do. And we do a lot of weird stuff. We'll take tires and paint them and make them into planters for trees, and we'll do we repurpose a lot of different things and make it aesthetic in the gardens. So it's good that you guys see something and you're seeing it differently than most people would. But one of the questions I had for you is if you've been able to take advantage of getting other Chase team members. Are you going to? Well, you've got a 3-day install, right? So a great opportunity for team building, which is really probably the one of the biggest impacts of a garden is the social element, right? And obviously we use the kids, the students, the parents, everybody else at the school, but it's really, I think it's more rewarding for Chase when you've got some other employees that come out on a Saturday and work. I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah. So we do a lot of different events, and most of the time we get a lot of volunteers from our company. A lot of our team members participate. This one at Valencia, we haven't gotten volunteers yet, but I'm hoping for this next one we'll be able to, especially with the paver install. But I know at Sunland Elementary, we did a Saturday class for the teachers. And so we had a lot of volunteers come to that and participate.
Well, wait a second. You had somebody there that was an architect. So her friend is actually going to help us design a greenhouse for one of our new schools.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's actually my wife.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And when I met her, I was like, "You're an architect," and we have to loop her in. This is going to be great.
Yeah, she's excited.
She's very excited, which is really cool.
And
What's the concept of the design? You're not buying a kit. You're gonna
No. So we're building one in our own backyard, and we're trying to refurbish a lot of old windows to build it. And it's actually a concept that is catching a lot of interest in most gardeners that want to build a greenhouse, just trying to refurbish and reuse and recycle. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. So we had brought it up to Joe last Saturday, and of course, Joe being Joe was like, "Hey, great idea! You guys come do that for us."
Let's come and do it. Yeah.
Well, and
It looks cool when you get those wooden frames that are kind of peeling paint and different colors, maybe pastels in there and that kind of thing. And then you look at the whole thing and it's beautiful.
It's the A in STEAM. It's art.
There you go.
But I think it aligns too with what we're doing with our planters. We went from when we first started, we had some donations of the cedar planters from Amazon, and we're actually making our own now. And we did it through lessons of working with the schools, because the schools are telling us we want something that's durable. We want something, if it breaks, it's modular, it's easily to replace. But if we have to redesign the school, where we can move it. So we're designing our own now at Urban Farming Education, where they're very thoughtful. There's steel end posts with wood in between, and there's even sleeves where you can add your shade structure. And the best part of it is they look amazing, and they're cheaper than what you can buy on Amazon.
And you can use those same concept for composting and
Absolutely.
vermicomposting. We've got the pit that we've did at the yard as well. So it's the idea of being mobile is important
Yeah.
because a lot of these schools, they'll give us a space and then down the road they want to change and put it somewhere else.
Well, and at Valencia, they have two fairly large masonry block planters. And I'm not a big fan of those because I feel like it just heats up the soil so fast, especially in our hot summers.
Yeah.
So they're going to reuse those as their composting
Perfect.
bins, essentially.
Yeah.
Or their composting space. So it's perfect. They're clearing them out, and that's what they're going to use
Can
them
handle
for,
the
so.
heat and, and the whole thing. And they can get a little wet. Composting is a little bit of a wet thing, but that's fine. I mean, the planters can, a masonry planter can last quite a while.
Definitely.
So,
But it was cool to see that they're just using what they have in their space.
yeah, and some of their planters they had were like pretty small. So you have to okay, what are we going to put in a planter like that? It could be a pomegranate tree. It could be, something. But sometimes some of those early garden designs, you wonder what people were thinking. But again, you can incorporate it and go through. So you did come up with a layout and a design. Joe was his first architectural
Yeah.
He did a
endeavor.
great job.
Yeah, but from what you're alluding to is really important in its purpose, and honestly, that's why I like working at UFE, but I like working with our partners too, because when I look at the garden, I look through it at a specific lens. When you look at it, you're coming from a different industry and you see it differently. But you travel the world too. You go to gardens all over the world.
Oh.
He sent me a million pictures of what you saw in Costa Rica. But even with those pictures, we're starting to incorporate vertical gardens and different.
What's crazy is I go to some of these gardens in areas that you don't associate with wealth, right? And the gardens are like so much better than most of the gardens we have. It's like we don't put a priority on it. The one in Costa Rica had a converted part of a grass area, so it was kind of cool the way the kids could sit in the grass and that kind of thing. But they did the tires that were painted, and then off to the side they built a big, more of a hoop house than a greenhouse. And hoop houses really are effective, because they're so cheap to put in. I think they were using PVC or steel, recycled steel. And then you can change it from plastic to shade in a heartbeat. And it's basically doing the same thing that a greenhouse would do. I think of greenhouses, I think of guys trying to grow orchids or something really specialty, like if I did that in my backyard and I had time to do it as a hobbyist. But these gardens kind of inspire me because they're done. Obviously they're done on a budget, and that's what we try to do too. Is leverage. Chase has been good to us and helped us with some funding on some of this stuff, but most of that funding is going for materials, and if it's well thought out enough, the products are sustainable. With some team membership and with the schools doing most of the labor, and it being so quick, the points in time that you need people to actually work on it, it's pretty minimal.
Yeah.
You come in, you do an install, and then you can continue on that same school. You can continue little improvements that help with the pedagoggical aspect. You can add in giving them a microscope or something inexpensive that really takes the garden to another another stage. But the gardens that you're doing right now at Valencia, at least that was a nice long one. Sometimes we get these weird little spaces at schools that we got to work with, and getting that leverage. Most of it is materials only. And if it's well thought out and it's mobile and it's usable for a long period of time, it's a great return on investment for anybody who comes in and helps us with it. The other part of that is how the vegetables themselves, when you take a look at, we have 3 seasons in Arizona, but really with schools you have more like 2 because nobody wants kids out there in 120 degrees.
Right.
And they're often on break during the summer. But in that time period, most of our work is pretty intensive. I would call it intensive agriculture because in a small area we're growing a lot of stuff. And just the product that you're producing, which we use, right? They use it in the cafeteria. The kids can take it home, that kind of thing. If you look at the price, the price that is on the USDA, the average commodity value of a stalk of broccoli or lettuce or whatever, we take that. I've taken the price and we've calculated for instance, in a 48 bag ready-go garden system, X number of square footage, that after a year, with 3 seasons it was a year, but let's just say in 2 years, just the value of the produce we've grown covers the cost that we installed, the entire garden with, right? So that is kind of a cool thing. And if these gardens are truly engaging the community, they last years and years and years and years. And, so if you really think about it, what other philanthropic effort can you get where your money is growing 10 times in that amount of period? And it's really not always about the money either. It's, again, when we engage businesses to come in and they do that team building and they see their efforts over a period of time actually make a difference in the community, it's kind of a cool thing.
Well, that entire experience, too, is truly priceless. Those kids are going to be able to take what they've learned and use it for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish that when I was a kid, I would have had that experience in a garden. Because, I love gardening now, but I didn't find it until I was a little older. You truly can't put a price on that.
Yeah. I don't know if I liked it when I was a kid, but, my father was a gardener and he was also a bit of a maniac. And I didn't get any of the fun stuff to do. It was always the labor. But I did learn along the way. And then when I was 12, I took care of 17 lawns and homes in the area, and they all had gardens. So I got involved with it that way too. And I did a lot of, I don't even know where I got some of the ideas, but some of them were wrong, as I look back. But it is kind of funny how these experiences early on, you don't even realize 20, 30, 40 years later that they're part of you, and you incorporate them into something totally different.
Absolutely.
It's the same thing with education. How many of us go to school, go to college, get a degree in something, and then we don't do that. But maybe 20 years down the road or 30 years down the road, we do it again, or we're using some of the lessons that we didn't really pay attention to at the time, and now we're incorporating them. So that's the weird thing about education and about life and experiences. And that's the cool part about a school is that the facilities there, the teachers are there, the students are there, the community. When we get organizations like Chasse involved, they're there, and together they're doing something that's viable. When I did a community garden that was completely removed from that setting, it was a lot more difficult. It was just money out, building infrastructure and that kind of thing. But that infrastructure is already there at the school. So, and the kids are forced to go, the teachers are forced to go to school. I say forced, it shows you my attitude when I was a kid, right? But they're there 8 hours a day, 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, and they're put into a classroom. We're just taking that classroom outdoors and kind of vetting some of the natural curiosity that the kids have. And I love the idea that, art is brought in. Think about when you were a kid, right? And I think back when I was in grade school, we'd look around at other kids in the class and maybe get a little jealous or at least observe, right, what other kids are doing, and maybe that's how you get inspired. But there was always the fastest kids, right? And then there was the kids who would sit there and doodle, and you look over and wow, they're like artists, right? And the kid who could play music, or the kid who, whatever. There was always that diversity in the classroom. And there's people who are in these classes now that are little burgeoning, artists, right? And getting them to come out and help when we're doing some of the aesthetic work in the garden is kind of a cool thing.
It is.
Because, a lot of them are like more talented than we are.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because when I look at the school grounds as a former principal, and you've made this comment before, that the grounds outside of the classrooms are pretty non-functional. It's just grass and concrete.
Yeah.
But we're changing the function of it. But one of the stumbling blocks I think that schools have is they don't have the capacity to do it. So they need help or assistance to teach teachers, get kids engaged. Otherwise, it's just another collection of plants. So having a purpose, getting kids engaged, it's really empowering. So doing it as an organization is great, but then working with master gardeners and companies like Chasse is great too, because we all see it a little bit different, but we have a common goal. We want the kids to utilize their property. We want them to be engaged in sustainable farming. UFE wants to get kids thinking about STEM education, which Chasse Building Team does as well. With that in mind, we have a really exciting event that's coming up that Chasse Building Team is going to be a part of. We're going to have a conference this summer. It's UFE's first conference, and we have some exciting partners. We have the USDA, we have their sister agencies, we have ASU, possibly hosting at GCU. So it's giving us the opportunity to work with different governmental agencies, different industry leaders, to show them that this isn't something that we're doing in isolation. It's something that we're engaging the community and working on together. So I said I wasn't going to put you on the spot, but I am. So if you had your way, what would you want to teach at this conference?
Oh, no.
I know.
There's so many things. You asked me what I was passionate about earlier, and I did say vermiculture, which I am, because I love worms and I love what they do, and I think it's so cool, the nutrition they provide to the soil and the plants. But I am obviously a gardener in the low desert of Arizona, and so and we have some challenges, but we also are very lucky enough to have a lot of growing seasons, although they are short growing seasons.
Right.
So I think, between vermiculture and low desert gardening, I think those two things are probably my biggest passions, and probably something I want to talk about.
Yeah, and it was a really great experience going to Sunland with you, because we tried something different. We had existing composting bins, and I didn't tell you this, but we went back and took pictures of the soil, and it's black. It looks so good. But we ran into some troubles with the kids, because we were having third graders trying to turn soil, and they couldn't do it. So we had to get an aerator, and the kids were able to do that. But when I talked to the teachers about vermiculture, just the look of fear on their face, like, what do they eat? What do they do? Do the worms eat the plants? There were all these great questions, and you came out and you really helped us. It was your idea to do the design where we did the buckets with the holes in it, where we buried the buckets and then we fed them, and then the kids and the teachers were like, "Oh, I can do this now."
Yeah.
So that was amazing.
That was it. Kim did that too,
Yeah.
and I've probably read every book in the world on vermicompost, and almost done with getting to a point where I'm publishing the one I've done, and I've never really seen anyone. Normally, you separate the vermicompost operation from the garden, but what you're talking about is putting that right in the garden,
Yeah.
and feeding them.
It just creates this little ecosystem, and I think
Sure.
that's a lot of gardening. To your point, like when you were in, was it Puerto Rico or
Costa Rica.
Costa
this
Rica?
time.
You said their gardens are beautiful, and I think that's because although they don't have the resources, they bring nature back.
Right.
To it. And
There's so many places in the world that they're so environmentally, we spend our time on things that are kind of superficial here,
Yes.
and when you go to some of these other areas, when I was in Fiji earlier this year and in New Zealand, everything's different. They're really tuned in. New
Yeah.
Zealand is like 85% sufficient on using solar and air, wind and things like that for their energy.
Yeah.
But in New Zealand, it's the same thing. But some of these areas are in climatically less challenging places, right?
Yes.
They're Costa Rica is closer to the equator. They get more humidity and rain. And, it was a volcano. It was basically lots of volcanoes there. So the soil is like amazing.
Yeah.
But as I'm going there, I'm like, oh my God, all the stuff that's growing, mango trees, banana trees, coffee. It's one of the best places to grow coffees. And these gardens are just flourishing. And I'm thinking, wow, all that work we do here in the desert, it's like a struggle. But we do have sunshine. We do have irrigation, and with correct soil preparation, we can grow a lot of stuff, year round too. It's not like we're, in Boston where it's covered in snow most of the year. So that part is kind of cool.
Yeah. Nature has a way of auto-correcting itself, and I think if we just look and we observe and we utilize those practices in our own gardening methods, that it makes it a lot easier. And
Right. You got to pay attention. You got to
You do.
stop and listen.
Yeah.
I don't stop and listen too much, but if you stop and listen, you can do that biomimicry, which is what we're talking about, and then it's really cool to see, like, oh
Amazing.
my God, I didn't have to work so hard. I didn't have to think so hard. It's just, it does it on its own.
Yeah.
That's the cool part of nature and life in general. That's the essence of it, and that's the ecotherapy part of the whole deal.
Speaking of ecotherapy, do you want to pour some wine?
Oh, sure.
So,
Joe's not going to sit here without drinking, that's for sure.
well,
it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah, and I honestly love the story. And when you tell people about the vineyard, it's great because if you actually see the pictures of where it's growing, it doesn't seem like it's possible. So
No.
Did I ever take you to any of the vineyard? Did we ever take a little trip?
no, but
Oh, I'll have
I've
to
seen
do that.
pictures.
Yeah, I'll
So
have to do that one of these days. Seems like it's kind of, I guess it's kind of out of the way. I'm trying to think of who I just brought out there, but yeah. And right now at the vineyard, we, everything went dormant, and then we put a whole layer of compost down, and then everything started to bud, so we pruned everything back, and then we. In the next week or two, we have a new blend, a Bacchus blend, which is compost, vermicompost, and zinc, and it's got a couple other things. And so we'll put those on each of the vines. And as things grow, in the next month or so, we'll start seeing probably in a month and a half, we'll see grapes. And so we thin out the clusters, so there's not that many. Sucking all the energy. And then because we're in Arizona and it gets so hot right at they call it veration, when the green grapes turn purple. Last year, 40% could never get there because we had too many clusters, and because it got hot so quick, but also the plants just couldn't take up enough nutrient, so now we have a different nutrient mix. We're going to thin those clusters out, and then another cool thing is we're using a foliar that we've developed, which is more of a phosphate, and we'll spray the grapes at that time, that last month and a half, where those grapes are turning, and we'll see what happens. But we're thinking that this year we'll have a better grapes, better yield, and less wastage than we had in the past. So we're just changing some of the techniques, and that's what you got to do. Gardening is about, like anything in life, it's mostly about mistakes. and you just choose whether or not to learn from it, or if it's worth the effort for you to try something else. What do you got a home garden? How do you handle that? What have you been doing there? Do you make your soils, bring soils in? Do you do any worm stuff there?
Oh yeah, I have vermiculture in all my beds. I have my own compost, and I also live in a historic neighborhood, so we have a lot of trees, and we have flood irrigation, which I'm very fortunate to have.
That's great.
So in the fall, all the trees drop their leaves, and nature doesn't like bare soil. Those leaves are there for a reason.
Right.
And and we have so many leaves, so I make a lot of leaf mulch. So I'm very fortunate to have that gold.
That's cool.
It's like
it's a good mix, yeah.
liquid gold for me,
Right.
or I guess soil gold, I should say. And then I will kind of reuse scraps in my house. So like when I peel a banana, I'll put the banana peel in water and use that as a fertilizer for my tomatoes. And I'll just, my calcium, eggshells. I save all my eggshells. I bake them and turn them into a powder and mix them with a vinegar solution so that calcium is pulled out faster from the eggshells.
You've just added a little acid with the vinegar. Mm-hmm. And we have a high pH, so that drops that. That's another.
So I just
cool
use little tips and tricks, and like you said, it's trial and error, and I can't tell you how many times I've failed, but that has provided solutions
Right.
to a more flourishing garden in the long run. So it can get a little defeating sometimes, but
Oh yeah.
I think that's the amazing part of bringing this to students is they are, it's piquing their curiosity. It's making them, observe things and come up with new solutions and think critically, which I think a lot of us don't think critically anymore.
Right.
And because we have this and like a phone in front of our eyes all the time with all the answers.
Exactly.
So it really does slow you down. And in this life, this rat race, it's something really cool. And I love that these students at these schools are getting to experience that at an early age.
And most people don't realize the amount of waste in agriculture.
Oh, yeah,
Even
it's
in
crazy.
industrial agriculture, they say 40% of it doesn't make it, out of the fields for one reason or another. It's not the right shape. It's not the too ripe or underripe or whatever, or the bugs get to it and they didn't catch it in time. And, there's a lot of different factors behind, how they didn't, when they were gleaning the fields, a certain percentage didn't make it through the harvester, things like that. So when you're doing it at home, you should realize, even the professionals have issues with, growing stuff, right? But one of the little tricks or techniques I use when I'm composting is I just take everything in the kitchen that's usable, coffee grinds, whatever, banana peels, and put it in a food processor, and then add water to it and turn it into a little bit of a slurry, and then layer it, right? So if you're using your leaves, you can layer it in between the leaves in a thin coating. It's not cheating for you to get some of our dairy composted manure.
I love, hey,
Again, but you don't have to spend that much
No.
because you can do layers of it because you're providing a lot of your own with the leaves and with the food. And if you do it in layers, the reason it's kind of cool is that insects and bugs are put off by the manure or by the composted manure, and they're kind of buried and hidden when you've got it, in that layer. And it's a liquid layer, so the microbes, because you've just gone through that process, you've increased the square footage or square inches surface area of that fruit when it's all ground up. You got little pieces or whatever, and because of that, the microbes can go crazy, and now it doesn't take as long to decompose that. So it's another way of kind of keeping the insects
That's
at
a
bay,
great-
so to speak.
Great idea.
But I love the idea that first person I know that has cooked their eggshells and add vinegar to it. That's another cool. So there's so many different things that
Yeah.
And Joe and I were talking before about we established a community of gardens for Arizona, and it's difficult to get everybody to talk to each other. But part of our sustainability long term is to have we have that, on our website. We have tricks and that kind of thing. There's all kinds of blogs and different resources. But the biggest thing is getting gardeners like you at home or a school teacher to be able to go online and communicate. On a quarterly basis, there's something going on, right? On a monthly basis, it's like, did you get your seeds in, or did you harvest your seeds, or can you wait another month or another 2 or 3 weeks? And that kind of communication is the best, because it's when you're really seeking information instead of we all just go straight to Google or to ChatGPT, and that's a resource too.
Yes.
But it's we're in a microcosm here, in Arizona, where some of the stuff that you're reading on or you're seeing on Google is worldwide or national or whatever. But knowing that somebody put down their plants and we got a frost or whatever, or it's cool. And then learning little tricks like, hey, take the eggshells and bake them and put vinegar on it. So those are some pretty cool things. Those are things that you can talk about when you're at the conference and at the school when you're doing it.
Yeah, and that's a great thing about our urban farming education. We are involved with a lot of nonprofits, but we're also partnering now with U.S. Composting Council. Arizona is actually going to start its own chapter. So super excited that we have leadership or people on the executive board from urban farming education, from soil, seed, and water. But the two main purposes for the Arizona chapter are advocacy and education. So getting everybody together, teaching them, making it accessible. And it's not just for industry, it's not just for corporations, it's also for schools and for the individuals as well, to make a difference. Because when you look at Arizona in comparison to California, Vermont, and Maine, we're a little bit farther behind. And the exciting thing about Arizona when it comes to recycling or composting is we've interviewed politicians that are interested in composting.
Sure.
So this is something we want.
There's a lot of people. I think we all look at what the optimum thing should be, right? Everything should be recycled. Nobody loves throwing their stuff in a garbage can and knowing that it's going in a waste landfill that it won't decompose for hundreds of years or whatever. Everybody wants to do it, but we're all frustrated with it. Nobody's really teaching us how to do it or source separate it, and then it's hard for the cities to collect or for groups to collect. So it has to be this collective thing that we do as a society, and you can see it in places like Fiji or in Costa Rica where they actually are living it. It's possible. And in Japan it's the same thing. Everyone looks at all these resources as precious, but it comes down to the whole idea of the education aspect and making people aware and giving them that access allows everyone, and our listeners. Most of our listeners are. It's like singing to the choir, right? They are interested in climate smart ideas. They're interested in education. They're interested, and that's why they tune in. And it reminds me of a quote that Buckminster Fuller had. It wasn't actually. He was just talking, and it came out. But his at one point he was supposed to be doing a keynote speech at a big conference, and he was in the bathroom, and somebody came in, and he was wiping the bathroom sinks down, and he was 5 minutes late for his talk with 500 people waiting to hear from him, and he just looked. The guy's like, "What are you doing in here? And what are you wiping?" And he just looked at him, and he said, "Well, whose world is it anyway?" Mm-hmm. And I think that's maybe that's the tagline we use to end all of our podcasts.
Yeah.
Whose world is it anyway?
Can I ask
No,
you?
it came to you.
Can I ask just one quick question? One of the things that I wanted to bring up today was you've actually changed the way I look at gardens. I've never told you this before. When I've looked at gardens before, and in talking with you, the same thing, my scope was very, very narrow. So I was looking for an instructional garden. And you've always told me schools should develop their entire property as a huge garden. Now, the exciting part after working with you and having conversations with some of these schools, they're more and more open to having bigger and bigger gardens. So the one we're working at now, it's 250 feet by 25 feet. There's one in Litchfield that's even bigger than that. When you look at a school and you think of what the ideal garden could be, what do you see? Because I know it's a lot different than I see. So what do you see? What would be the ideal best case scenario for a garden at a school?
I think that for any garden, it's companion planting and making sure that what you're planting is working with other plants and they're supporting each other and they're bringing in pollinators and there's multifunction to a garden. It's not just this bed is just for tomatoes and this bed is just for flowers. You can combine things that create a little bit of an ecosystem and support each other and put ground cover to protect the soil and retain moisture. When we were talking about the roses, it was like, okay, what can we plant with the roses? What likes heat? What's going to protect the roses and provide a little bit of shade or whatever it may be. I always think that the best gardens have multiple functions and that certain plants are planted with other plants to either deter pests or attract beneficial insects or whatever. So it's just a little like
Well, this is what
place.
we're kind of like a Trojan horse in the Chase team. They don't know that's what we are, but you've got an entire ecosystem of people. You build schools.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's one of your you're one of the big guys in town in Arizona that do that, right? And so that means you're working with the architects. That means you're working with school districts. The idea is to start incorporating it early. So
Yeah.
we're not having to retrofit all the schools so much, but you could be the more people get involved, and if we can get some of your architects, and we're going to pull more and more people, but if they start seeing it, why not put in citrus to some degree in the landscape, or put in stone fruits, or put in palm trees, or just bushes, hedges of pomegranate and things like that,
Yeah.
where they're already putting plant material in. And my idea of a perfect school in Arizona, we're either using native plants or using plants that can be used as food or medicine.
Yeah.
That if nothing else, it's pedologic. The kids can go and see it, and they can, whether or not they can harvest a date or somebody else does that, it doesn't matter. It's the fact that the school is got all that going on. And I agree with you. What you're talking about is having diversity in the garden, right? So having companion plants, legumes that are introduced every other cycle or whatever, or cover plants, things like that, pollinators, the whole thing.
Yeah.
If it was up to me, we'd have a beehive at every school too. But
I
some
love
people
that.
fight that concept a little. But so yeah, I think it's great, and it's the beginning. We've started a good partnership, and we've
Yeah.
got the right partner on board, and
The gears definitely have to shift. I think that in education, they were building so long for, building more like institutions
Right.
for factories and things like that. And so I think
and they're
the
beautiful
gears,
campuses.
They
Some
are.
of these schools, Levine's got just gorgeous schools where you came from,
Yeah.
and you guys probably built some of those. But the deal is that there's got to be that social glue that's part of that. And I think garden venues are, what we're doing, or the STEAM labs, we call it a STEAM lab. It just takes advantage of what's already there. And
Right.
from a budget standpoint, it's insignificant. If it's done early on,
Oh, absolutely. It's part of
if it's part of the
planning.
process, it's really not a a huge, costly. It's not have a garden club versus the football team or a chess club. It's nothing to do with that, and it can be all inclusive as we do it. So, anything else we want to?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it just last Saturday at Valencia because it's a school where a lot of the refugees go, and it's gardening is kind of like music or dance. It's like a very universal language, and it doesn't matter if you can't speak the language. It's something they're going to know.
Yeah, the earth is the earth.
Or at least it's
right?
something that they're going to be able to do with their hands and see and observe. So I just think it's just really cool too to bring that into an education aspect, because regardless if you speak the language or you're just very different than somebody else, like you're not an athlete, you're an artist or whatever it may be, you can come together and watch something grow and learn.
Everybody's got to eat.
Yeah. So I just think that's really cool too. It's a cool aspect. So
yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I had when we had Agave Farms community garden uptown. We had the international refugees had a section of our plot, and one day I got a call from the USDA. You got to get there was a plant that they had somehow they smuggled the seed in from. I can't remember. I think it was in Africa somewhere, and we consider that an insidious seed, and that was one of their staples, that they grew in Africa. So I was like, well, let us harvest it, and then we'll eradicate it, and we won't use it again. But it is interesting, we when I'm in Africa, some of the things they eat, like we have greens, right? Everybody has greens in their diet, but they're using like pumpkin leaves and things that we don't use. And it's all part of a stew that they're doing it. And the reality is, we get three things out of nutrition, right? We get fat, protein, and carbohydrate. And there's different qualities of fat, protein, and carbohydrates, some that are good, some that are bad. But at the end of the day, whether it tastes good or not, that's how that's how you feed your body, rather than just going to the store and buying Pringles. I shouldn't have said, buying some kind of fast food, processed foods or whatever. So it is kind of cool, and that school is cool because of the refugees. But
do we have a suggestions for the wrap up phrase? You said "Whose world is it anyway?" I liked your other one of "Everybody's got to eat." Do you have
Everybody's got to eat.
Do you like it? Do you have a suggestion?
I liked Whose world is it anyway? But everybody's got to eat too.
I was trying to get it changed. No, whose world is it anyway?
All right.
Well, I appreciate my guests today. Always great to have both of you, Joe and Taylor, and we'll wrap up this episode of Harvesting Wisdom, and we'll see you again next week.
All clear.
No tagline? Whose world is it anyway?
Well, I did say.
Oh, okay, good.
Thank you for joining the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Click subscribe and like for ongoing insightful conversations. Explore our webpage for show notes and additional resources. Visit our guests' webpage for deeper insights. Your engagement is the foundation of our journey, and until next time, keep pursuing wisdom.